Welcome back, adventurers. I'm your host, R.R. Slugger, and today we continue our journey along the Orient expedition with set 7412, Yeti's Hideout. Miss Pippin Reed is our protagonist today, and she has surely dressed well for the weather. With her brown fur coat and red scarf, her torso design is yet again set exclusive, just like her Indian attire from earlier. One aspect I admire about the print work of her outfits is how they remain gender neutral. All too often these days, the LEGO group is keen to assert femininity by adding implications of contours on either side of the body. I've never really been a big fan of this, as it essentially genders torsos in a way that I think is wholly unnecessary. Minifigures don't look like real people. They can't even touch the tops of their own heads. Why would slender proportions even be on the table? It's just a weird choice to me. Thankfully, Pippin comes from an era before this became common practice, allowing for much more versatility when it comes to designing custom characters. One particular item of note here is her large fur cap. This hat mold was made specifically for the Orient expedition, and only appeared in 2 sets this wave. It would go on to be included in one more set in 2005, but after that, the mold was retired completely. Somewhat understandable though, this is admittedly pretty niche. Just like the turban piece we saw in India, this Himalayan hat features a plumage port for attaching all sorts of feathered accessories. However, just like the turban piece we saw in India, no set ever made use of this feature. Still, the future-proofing here shows that the part designers were thinking ahead. Pippin brought along an ice pick and her Leica 1 camera in an effort to hopefully catch a photo of the elusive mountain man, the Yeti. Unlike our previous monstrous figure, Tigura, the legend of the Yeti does seem to have some roots in authentic folklore. Having been bestowed numerous other names, such as Zuta or Metokangmi, the broader term abominable snowman actually originates in the writings of Charles Howard Bury, leader of the British Mount Everest reconnaissance expedition of 1921. In his book released the same year, Howard Bury describes the large human-like footprints they found en route to the mountain. When the Sherpas mentioned that it might be the Metokangmi, Howard Bury anglicized it to become the abominable snowman. Contrary to its LEGO depiction, the Yeti is more commonly described as having thick brown or black fur, not the snow-white appearance we get here. It would have been interesting to see these pieces produced in more accurate hues, but I can't help but speculate that the darker color would have obscured most of the molded details. Indeed, the Yeti doesn't feature any printing, making it the only one of the trio to lack this trait. Still, what we do get here is really unique. In addition to the more obvious connection points, the Yeti's ears can also accept bar-sized objects for all sorts of silliness. Likewise, there's always the possibility of adding a tail, should you desire. Overall, I think the Yeti displays superb minifigure monster design work. As I've said before, it's a shame that these parts would all essentially retire here, unable to survive past the Orient expedition. We'll have to just appreciate them in the now, rather than dwell on what could have been. The Yeti's hideout itself boasts an interesting mix of Tibetan architecture and frozen facades. The entire scenario is situated atop a set-exclusive 8x16 base plate in white. The Everest leg of the Orient expedition is home to many critical snow terrain pieces, and this base plate is no exception. Another such element is the little ugly rock piece that comprises the door of the Yeti's sanctum. 2003 would seemingly be this part's final appearance, and I'm not exactly sure why it has to be this way. The LEGO group still makes this piece, and obviously white is not a retired color, so what gives? We couldn't find a place for one of these in the last 20 years? Really? The out-of-production elements on the other side of the build, however, are a good bit more understandable. These brown arch pieces are essentially set exclusive, only appearing in a couple of factory floor clearing creator bins after their introduction here. In a similar boat are these 2 medium orange 1x1 bricks that very nearly lived and died with the Orient expedition. Only a pair of creator buckets and an appearance in Belleville keep this part from being series exclusive. Along with other gray, black, and tan bricks, these parts help formulate the makings of what could be a shrine or a stout bell tower. We'll see similar building techniques on the Temple of Mount Everest itself, but even utilized at this small scale, I find the results quite convincing. There exists an odd anecdote about this yellow finial, similar to the one we saw in the previous episode. Apparently, Sam Sinister made off with this artifact and stored it within his estate, should the 2020 Haunted House set be believed. The instructions call it the Golden Dingus. As weird as that sounds, I've heard that in Dutch, dingus is essentially equivalent to thingy, so I guess that makes sense. Still, it's a weirdly specific throwback, one that apparently has appeared in other sets. I feel like this is some sort of LEGO designer in-joke that I'm just not getting. The Yeti's hideout is built around a central play feature that integrates both halves together. By pulling on this gray handle, Pippin can open a drawer to reveal a green gem inside. However, opening this drawer also causes the Yeti's inner lair to swing open, revealing the abominable snowman himself. This mechanism is actually quite simple, relying on a single rope with studs brick to make it happen. This is a fairly rare part in white, and sadly we wouldn't see it again after 2003. While there isn't much going on inside the cave itself, we do get a look at a higher than average amount of tiles and jumpers used in a set of this vintage. I'd say the Orient Expedition is 2 for 2 when it comes to creating good play features using rope pieces. Atop the icy enclosure flies a flag that can be confusing at first glance. So far, this series has taught us that yellow is the color of Sam Sinister and his cronies. To then see his pennant blowing in the wind here might suggest that he beat our heroes to this location. However, I don't think that's the case. With the secret of the tomb, it was plausible to assume that Sam planted his flag after securing the prize. I don't think the same can be said for the Yeti's hideout or the Temple of Mount Everest for that matter, both of which feature these yellow flags. Instead, I think it's much more likely that these banners represent traditional Tibetan customs and coincidentally conflict with the aesthetic language that the Westerners brought with them. Perhaps medium orange flags would have helped make that distinction more clear, but alas. Still, I'm sure Sam won't mind pretending he got here first. Among the icicles hanging on the door to the hideout are 2 clubs that the Yeti can use to defend its home. I'm quite surprised that neither of these weapons were utilized in the Orient Expedition board game. Instead, we get the following 3 cards. Firstly, Pippin is our player character here, possessing identical stats to her depiction in India. Of her 3 appearances in Orient Expedition, it's arguable that this was the only affordable way to get your hands on this character. It's a shame that she continued to be sidelined even in this 4th and final wave of adventurers, but at least she made an appearance in all 3 regions. Our second card belongs to the Yeti, a villain that must be overcome should you wish to raid his hideout. While just as strong and as lucky as Tigura, the Yeti is notably slower should a character want to test his mettle. Lastly, we get the encounter card for the Yeti's hideout. Critically, this encounter does not have a bypass item, and the thresholds are set comparatively higher than Tigura's roar. Only a well-equipped player should attempt this challenge. Before we disembark for today, let's spend a few moments examining the 2 alternate builds on the back of the box, both of which contain some kind of play feature. This first model seems to depict a small spire at the base of the mountain. While tempting to investigate, you never know if the Yeti is lurking close by. Pulling the end of this rope causes the structure to withdraw, exposing a green gem underneath. A great reuse of the string play feature here, though I don't really know what this part is supposed to be. Maybe the Yeti is supposed to stand watch here? Your guess is as good as mine. The second model appears to be a small shrine of sorts, hidden within a cave. Just like the last model, there is a gem to be acquired here, but pulling on this rope reveals the Yeti in dynamic fashion. While there's a lot about this model I don't particularly like, this reveal is great, and might outclass the play feature of the main build if I'm honest. Overall, ambitious work here, even if the execution leaves something to be desired. The Yeti's hideout makes for a great addition to the Orient Expedition. Besides containing many notable and useful pieces, the inclusion of the Yeti and how its history ties directly to Mount Everest makes this a fitting addition to the series. I have to believe that the set designers started here, then expanded the Yeti concept to create fictitious monsters for India and China afterwards. Whatever the circumstances were, I'm glad we got this set in the end. With that, we're ready to move on to the skies of Tibet. I hope to see you there. I've been your host, RR Slugger, and I'll see you next time for another adventure.